morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the painting studio for session 2 of painting the Blue Goose. I've got the bird finished and I'm putting the videos together. In the first video, we got all the base colors kind of mapped out, some base texture on the bird. In this session, we'll go ahead and finish the bird as you see it here. Just a reminder, this is meant to be compete in a gunning class, so there's not a lot of detail. There are no feather splits. This is not a fully decorative bird. It's meant to be a relatively simple, functional paint job, and that's just so you're aware of that. You may be doing a fully decorative bird, but hopefully some of these concepts, some of the colors will be helpful to you as you do your own Blue Goose. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. That really helps me out. And we're getting close to 4,000 subscribers. That's fantastic. We want to spread the word on decoy carving, the fun it is, the joy it is, and it's all about appreciating the birds. I've said this before, but I've never done a Blue Goose before, and I just enjoyed the process of doing the research and making the corrections as you find mistakes as you go. And I'm leaving those in the film so that, that's what happens. You have to really look close to pick out some of the details. I don't know that I nailed it. We'll find out later, but I sure had fun making this Blue Goose Decoy. Let's get to the painting. Thanks for coming back.
All right, I'm going to start out by putting some markings on the rump here. I've got a nice big fan blender. And the key to a fan blender is getting the paint consistency right. It needs to be wet enough to pull off the brush like this. If it's too dry, it won't form a nice arc. If it's too wet, it won't fade out properly and give you a soft look. And then getting the brush splayed out like this so you get a little bit of a feather split look to it is also key. But you can see this is real time. I mean, it took about 2 minutes to paint those details on the bottom of the decoy, and it really adds some depth and life there. Now I'm using a mix of Nimbus Gray and Burnt Umber and a detail brush, and I'm just going to put some outlines on the primary feathers here. That first feather kind of just pops out from under, and then the rest of these feathers, you can see the feather edges, so I want to duplicate that on my decoy. So I'm just outlining these. We're not going to do any blending. Again, that first farthest most feather just kind of pops out from underneath, and then these you can see the layering in. So pretty quick work on those.
I've got a mixture of white gesso and raw umber. And I'm using this little chisel-shaped brush to give myself a decent wide line, and I want to keep this to a single stroke if possible. We don't want a lot of blending since this is a gunner. Just keep it simple. A little farther along.
A little farther along here, and now I've switched to a detail brush, same color mix here, and I'm just putting in these smaller feathers. Again, just a single stroke as much as possible. Just an indication of some wing feathers going under the scapulars here. I just want these to be nice and clean.
Now I've mixed up a little raw sienna with raw umber and a touch of brown earth. The edges of these feathers have kind of this sienna shade to them. And I'm just going to edge these big, longer feathers, and then I want to use the fan blender to just put some quick feather structure across the rest of the back and the side pockets. But this will kind of tie in to the rest of the feathering back here. Again, just a kind of a single stroke. We don't want this to be too yellow. Needs to be on the brown side. Just start to wrap a few feathers up into the back as well. Kind of line up on these wider feathers. Now I've got the fan blender loaded with that color. And I'm just going to go in here and put some indications of feathers. Same thing here. Like that. I'm just using the fan blender to flick feather tips on the side pocket and working my way up to the breast here. Kind of coming around the corner. Try to interlock and overlap some of these.
Now I'm going to use carbon black and just pull in a few feather quills. Again, just a single line on some of these bigger feathers. I'm going to take some off-white on the fan blender and just put a few feathers, light feathers, at the lower side of the side pocket back here. Now I'm taking just pure white gesso and a little filbert brush, probably 3/8 of an inch wide, and just flicking in some indications of feathers here. I don't want to go overboard, but I think just adding some feather structure to that off-white, so it's not just a pure blank white head, adds some life to the decoy. I'm not trying to be overly accurate here, just to place these so that they indicate they're layered feathers on the head. It's just a quick look at that top of the head there. Now I want to work on the base color of the bill with smoked pearl added to cadmium red light. That is Liquitex, and a little raw umber to tone that down and come up with this kind of off pink color. Painted that over the entire bill, and I'll give this a couple of good coats so it has a nice heavy coating. I've noticed in the reference up at the top of the bill you see shades of orange like this, and I'm using a combination of yellow orange and cadmium orange Josanya. Just a little bit of a wash here to give it an orange tint to the top of the bill and around the nostril area. I'm just doing a wet on wet blend here. Try to fade that into the surrounding pink areas. While that's still wet, I'm using smoked pearl on this little chisel shaped brush and lightening the nail, and then trying to softly blend that into the surrounding areas. So we don't want this to be bright white, just a lighter shade, and that's why I'm doing a wet on wet blend here. Let that dry, and then I'm coming back with an old filbert that's kind of splayed out to do a little bit of a softer blend with that smoked pearl and lighten the tip just a bit. Now I'm using burnt umber with carbon black in it and just painting in this very characteristic dark marking. It kind of covers the lower mandible and then fades into the upper mandible. So I'm using this little scrubber to actually scrub into the upper or the lower edge of the upper mandible, a nice little soft blend. Some of that dark goes into the upper mandible and really gives it that characteristic look with that arched up and arched down dark marking on the side of this pink bill. I had to look closely at the reference, and you can see a lot of variation in this area, but that dark marking definitely wraps up into the upper mandible. And then I didn't carve any detail into the lower mandible, but really with this dark marking, we don't need detail down there. I added burnt umber to the cadmium red light just to give me this darker kind of brownish red value for the nostril. I didn't want to make it pure black because from the reference it looks like it's more light than that, but I definitely wanted it to be dark enough to show from a distance. So I'm just trying to get that nostril painted in accurately. And then I also noticed in the reference a lot of times the tip here is a little bit darker and more red than the surrounding areas. So I'm using some Naphthol Crimson, just a very light amount on this scrubber, and just scrubbing in a little darker red there.
I looked at my reference overnight, and it seemed like the brown section was short here. And looking in further detail at various samples, these brown feathers are very long back here. So I'm going to lengthen these, and I'm going to cover up some of this white that is kind of underlaying, and get rid of the edges on a few of those feathers. I think it's going to be more accurate that way. All right, I've got those blocked in the base body brown. You can see I went ahead. These feathers are fairly long looking at the reference, so I want them that way, and extends this out a little more to cover up the rear section. some definite gray tones to these feathers. So I've got a little nimbus gray, burnt umber, touch of black, just to come up with this gray value, and almost no paint in the brush. And I'm just trying to hit the texture here to give these feathers a little bit of a gray value as they approach the rear of the bird. And not so chocolate brown. And this is quick work with the texture on here. I can just hit the highlights, kind of focus on the center of the feather. And I'm probably going to do that in various areas around the bird, because looking at the reference again, there are varying shades of blue-gray mixed in to the brown base color. So I can hit some of these, the base of some of these, just quickly. Just kind of scrub back and forth and give us some varying values. A little more of a gray tone to the bird that way. Now I've got a little raw sienna with raw umber going in and just highlighting the edges of these. Now I've got my carbon black, and I'm just going to go in and clean up these feather quills. In the areas that I put some of that lighter gray value. Here I've got those pulled back a little further. I'm happier with the look of that in the distance here where the dark feathers are. I think that's more accurate, and I like a little of the frosting put in there to bring some gray values out of that brown. Just took a little nimbus gray with burnt umber and pulled in some feather quills on the primaries. I think we're about done. One more little tweak. Looking at the reference again, the tips of these don't come to a sharp point. So I'm going back in and rounding these off a bit. Not a lot, but all of these tertial feathers, I brought them to a point, and it looks like they're more rounded at the end, so I'm going to make that change. So quick look at the rounded tips. Looks more goose-like now. It's more accurate. It's a subtle thing, but important when there aren't many details to convey the essence of the species. Just a quick look outside in bright sun. To see how the colors project. I like the feathering. It's not too scaly. Take a look in the shade. Outside, the head looked a little too polka dotted to me, so I'm just pulling some feather through those dots so that it breaks them up a bit. And back into the neck. After the paint has dried overnight, I seal the bird up with a couple of coats of Tester's Dull Coat. And then I like to put Krylon matte finish over that, puts just a touch of sheen back on the bird, which I like. The bill I've got masked off and sealed with Deft semi-gloss. That normally is a bit too shiny, so I'll go back with the matte finish and just knock that sheen down a bit. All right, the Blue Goose is done. We're happy with the way you turned out. You can make a great decoy. Okay, well that completes our Blue Goose Decoy series. We've got the bird painted. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And just as a reminder, this has been carved and painted to compete in a decoy competition where the rules require simple carving, simple paint job. So not a lot of splits in feathers, not a lot of blending. And so this has been a relatively simple paint job. If you're doing a fully decorative bird, it may not be that helpful. But hopefully some of the color selections, some of the feather studies that we've done in the course of painting this bird will be helpful to multiple people out there. And until next time, Tom Christie signing out. Thanks to all of you for the support for my channel and the feedback that I'm getting. It's providing value. That's the goal. So see you next time. Good carving to you.